And the point is this: that money owed, that debt due, is your and my sin. It's that big of an amount. It's that unpayable. It's that large. It's that looming. It's that kind of fearful to look at. You know, every week when we at our homes we do this ritual. I don't know if you do it, but it involves a thing on two wheels, and we wheel this stuff out to the end of our driveways, right? It's this awesome ritual. It's a stinky ritual. It's called taking out the trash. Sometimes you do it twice a week. And I don't know, I think I've used trash can examples a couple of times in preaching. I don't know why it keeps coming up to my mind, so sorry if you're tired of the trash can examples. But I think it's a really good way of looking at and thinking about your sin and your debt and the stink of it. Every week there's a whole can or two cans of that stuff, and every week it gets put away. The stench is taken, somebody else picks it up, and it gets deposited on the only mountains that exist in Florida. And which I personally think they should, honestly, civil planning, they should do those on the coasts and be like, yeah, Florida's got mountains now, it's great, come on down. You can get people from California, it'd be great. That's not gonna happen. And think of that, think of how much trash over a lifetime, or even just over a year, how much trash is removed from your property and then put on this, and the mountain gets higher and higher and higher. And honestly, guys, that's your sin. That's your sin. The sins of your mind, the sins of your heart, the sins of your body, is a pile that is literally that big. We should never undermine or devalue how great the pile is that we have accumulated in this life. And maybe you've taken steps, in your life, kind of practically. Maybe you've taken steps and you're now kind of like the kind of recyclers, like you've reduced your imprint, maybe you've reduced your trashy bit. Oh, that's great. Maybe you've stopped certain, and maybe you've done that with your sin life. Maybe you've stopped certain sins and you're kind of doing quote unquote, you're doing better. That doesn't remove the pile that existed. Sometimes we as human beings, we have this terrible idea that if we're doing better one week, that all of a sudden we are better. No, the week in the past still exists. The trash from the past still has to be taken out. It doesn't go away because you're doing better now. It has to be removed. And so this man comes before his master, and his master basically tells him, hey, the pile is due. You got to get this out of here now. You need to bring this money to me now. Imagine if God came to you and told you that today was the day, that you got to now start paying for your sins. You would be awestruck, and you would be caught off guard, and you would be scared. And so this man comes before his master, and the word in the Greek is very important here. The word in the Greek is Kyrios. If you've ever heard like the old Latin hymns, Latin and Greek actually, Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy. That's the word here. He says, Lord. And as I said before, when he comes and he falls before him, it's not just a kind of like, not just a humbling, but it's a worship. It's proskuneo. It's where we get the word prostrate. He comes and worships the master. Actually, the word proskuneo means to kiss the hand of. It's actually a term that's used in describing how dogs come and approach their master. They kind of lick the hand of the master. And the master, notice this because there's so many details that are so important in the text. Notice the master's response. As soon as he comes and worships and bows, read with me in verse 27. Then the master of that servant was moved with compassion. He didn't wait. He was moved with compassion, and he does two things. He released him and forgave him the debt. Two things that the Master does that are very important for you and me to know and remember today. When the Lord deals with you and your sin, he does these same two things. He releases you, which means to free you, so the person itself is freed. And then he also forgives or sends away the thing that you owe. And he always does both. And here's the big point that Jesus is first trying to get across to Peter and to us. Before you begin to even talk about how many times you should forgive somebody else or whether you should have any kind of unforgiveness, don't forget how awesome the Master's forgiveness is for you. Don't make light of the pile of that trash, the amount that is owed. Don't forget it. Don't forget it. He not only forgives your sin, he also frees you. And you need to know both parts very intimately. You need to be acquainted with things, to value how great the Master's forgiveness is for you. And you need to always come back to this point before you ever begin to deal with that other issue of dealing with others and unforgiveness. This is an amazing description of two concepts that are very important in the New Testament. One is the concept of grace, that is, it is forgiven and released without anything done on the part of the person. It is completely a work of God. And it is also a concept of justification, that you now are completely freed, and you now are completely owing nothing. You have been justified by the work of the Master, what he did in offering his forgiveness. It is a finished thing. And even Luther, we think of Luther historically as one who was very important, of course, in Protestantism and putting forth the kind of the only issues, the only by faith saved. But even he in his life, he describes that he struggled with this concept that it was the Lord's work only that he could trust in, because he was so tempted to make it something of himself. He was so tempted to think that he had to do something else by it. And maybe you've struggled with those things. It's very common with human beings to struggle with that. But here, right there in that demonstration of what the Master did, is a complete act of grace, and it is completely justifying. The man really was free, and you really are free by the blood of Christ. And he really was forgiven, and you really are forgiven of the whole thing. So it's important that we see the pile, and it's also important that we see the pile is now completely gone. Both. We need to remember both. The pile is huge, and the pile is gone.
Dear